Welcome to the opening line report. I know the comment section wanted me to do my best Drew Martin Betts impersonation, but I can't do it, you guys. He's just irreplaceable in that saying. That being said, let's bring in Teddy Covers. Talk about preseason week 1, what we learned, what we saw. Teddy, I'm in a tizzy. I'm on an airplane yesterday. My buddy Dan Liveshatz, Chris Thurston, and I went to the casino the night before. They said, hey, we're betting the Saints under tomorrow. We got the best of the number, under 39, right? Sitting there feeling great. Line closes 37.5, and then boom, third quarter, pick 6. Meaningless field goal as time expires. Meaningless, I get it. You got to get your kickers reps in, but you get the idea. It has been over city. 14-2. Week 1, the overs went. Let's break down what we learned in week 1 and why every single game basically went over the total.
Well, hello, Kelly. And of course, look, let's start with the intro, all right? Drew had this particular way of going, welcome in to the NFL opening. And it like, some reason that got everyone's blood going, myself included. All of a sudden, you get excited about it. So I'm sure you'll develop your own intro. We always, look, I love Drew. I miss Drew, but I'm very happy to be working with you. And I'm sure it'll be fine. But anytime there's change, people, it's something different. But welcome in. You'll find your you'll find your way to come.
Teddy do it. Teddy has the voice. It's deeper than mine, and that's all that matters.
When it comes to these overs, all right, what we're seeing, and we're seeing it already in the betting markets for week 2 of the preseason. After the Hall of Fame game went over, and we saw a bevy of overs in week 1. You talked about 14-2, and a lot of them just sneaking over the total again, but not all of them. Many of them flew over the total. We had multiple teams approach or exceed the total all by themselves, the Giants, the Patriots, et cetera, et cetera. And what's going to happen when you see that in week 1 of the preseason? Well, you're going to see a market reaction. And we're seeing that already with over money coming in on game after game. We'll talk about it as we go through these games one by one, like we do every single Monday morning. But the broader picture is this. It's a little bit random. It's not this. What did we see? There were 2 factors that really stood out to me. One, red zone execution better in week 1 this year than previous week 1s that I've seen. And, we saw more touchdowns and fewer field goals. 1st and 10 from the 20. Are you getting 3 points? Or are you getting 7? And this year, for whatever reason, we got a lot of 7s and not that many 3s. And, of course, there was a ton of big plays, especially on special teams. More big plays on special teams than the average week. And that's typical for week 1 of the preseason when teams are still working on special team issues. There were kick returns. There were punt returns. There were lots of drives starting in opponent's territory, starting with good field position, setting up short fields. And that made all the difference when it came to totals. Now, has the NFL changed and we're going to see all overs this year? Worth paying attention to. But the markets catch up quickly. And like I said, we're already seeing a bunch of over money come in here in week 2. If we get a bunch more big plays on special teams and we see another week where the red zone execution is stellar, we're likely to have another week of overs. But I wouldn't count on that. I would expect it to be much closer to 50-50 in week 2 of the preseason when it comes to totals compared to what we saw in week 1.
And depending on when you bet the Dolphins, dogs went 12-5 this weekend as well against the spread, which is one of my favorite things to see. Teddy, talk to me why you think the underdogs are cashing, or is that just another random anomaly for week 1 in preseason?
So make no mistake about it. The wise guys got their ass kicked this weekend. All right. I had a good handful of plays, and we're going to talk about them throughout the course, that certainly weren't right. And what happens in August, it doesn't take much money to move a line. All right. The markets move really quickly when bettors start coming in because they know they're not likely to get 2-way action on these games. So the lines move pretty fast. And in this instance, there are all kinds of circumstances. This game played out this way, that game. And as we go through the games, we'll talk about what played out and why it played out that way. But the bottom line was we saw many of the wise guy moves, the sharp money, get buried wrong for all kinds of different reasons. And therefore, you have a team that's a short dog and they take a money, boom, they're going to be a favorite in the New York Minute. And there were a handful of games that bounced back and forth. The Giants-Bills, the game where could have both sides of the favorite. You talked about Miami and Chicago and that late money coming for the Dolphins, very late money. Where Miami closed -1 at kickoff in some books. So there weren't a whole lot of games where the line moved mattered. There was one, we gave you an emergency betting alert last week at this time with the Raiders Seahawks, where the line move mattered a whole lot. And certainly Miami, Chicago was a second game like that where you bet it made a big difference in terms of whether you had a good Sunday of wagering or not so much.
Teddy, really quickly, I wanted to ask, because this was a discussion I had with some of the bettors that I linked up with in Boston. And I was sitting there, let's call it 10 minutes before Bengals-Eagles kicked off. And I said, man, that's what I got to bet the Eagles. And I look at my buddy who I know has Bengals +1 in pocket, like great number. And I go, aren't you going to try to go for a middle? And he goes, that would be the smart thing to do. And bet it. And I'm sitting there watching, the TV's over my shoulder, and I just kept shaking my head. Should people watching the show, should sharp better, should other people be taking advantage of these huge possible middles in preseason?
So if you're getting the best of the number, all right, and then you have the opportunity to get the best of the number the other way, there's certainly something to be said for that. You know, when you're catching 4 or 5, especially when you're crossing 0, there's a case to be made for betting one side early and then betting another side late. That said, for me, it always, and every hedging question for me comes down to a single question. Do you like your original bet? Do you still like your original bet? And do you legitimately like the other side at the current number? And it's a matter of balancing those two questions. If you still like your original bet, you're fine. You don't need to do anything. You know, I hate throwing away a winner and turning it into a push. All right. That bugs the crap out of me. I got the best of the number. Oh, well, now let's bet it the other way. So in general, when I do that, I'll bet it back for less. You know, if I have a full unit, I'll put a half unit on the other side. If it's just, all right, hey, the lines move 6 points, let's at least take some value back the other way. That's something that I can and do. Wouldn't argue with anyone else doing that as well. No, I'm not talking do. That was my picks yesterday. I'm just kidding. Not really. But it's something that bettors can and will do. But for me, it always comes down to, do I still like that first bet? If I still like that first bet, I tend to do nothing.
All right. Teddy has been crushing NFL Week 1 the last 10 years, 30-11. That is 73% against the spread, 8-2 against the spread with big tickets. It's 80%, guys. Teddy, talk to people right now, because there's still some time before the regular season of the NFL kicks off. You do a season win report every single summer, and it is a must read.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I spent a lot of time on the NFL. I spent a lot of time on the NFL in May and June. You know, post-draft, my focus is let's get ready for the season. And I spend the next 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how long it takes, prepping up and going through every team, going through schedule analysis, going through personnel issues, going through coaching issues. I spent a lot of time with it over the summer, early summer. And then we put up the win report. And obviously, when it goes 103-52 over a 24-year span, I'm doing something right. 17-4 with the 5% big tickets. Those have been very, very good over the years. We won the 5% big ticket last year, Saints under. We had a winning report again last year. So it's not like all these numbers were, you know, from way back in the day before the markets were as tight as they are now. And the other beauty about this report is that you end up using it all year long. You know, you use the analysis. If a team that we like gets off to a cold start, you're like, yeah, well, we expect them to bounce back. If a team that we don't like gets off to a hot start, like the Saints last year, we say, all right, tap the brakes a little bit. This team's not that good. So you can use that assessment and the write-ups throughout the course of the entire season. So it's a report that is done. Obviously, we talked about it very well over the years. It's available right now on my homepage, wt.buzz/TC at WagerTalk.com.
Okay, Teddy, let's get into NFL preseason week 2 starting Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have the Titans, who opened up as a 3.5-point favorite. Totals interesting. Seeing some under money come in now that it got ticked up to 37, open 35.5. Now we're seeing some buyback here, seeing some 36.5 there at the offshores. Break down this matchup and what we should expect to see from both teams in the second week of the preseason.
So I just want to ask you didn't ask me about rookie QBs. Are we saving that for a little bit later in the show?
I am going to say that. I've got a rookie QB in mind in case we see him week 2, because I want to talk about some of those maybe possible overreactions to one game sample sizes?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about Shaddeur Sanders before the show is through. Believe you me. So last night, I wrote down all the lines that were available before I went to bed. We'll talk about where they moved overnight. And the one thing that has happened this game, again, it was 3.5 last night. It's still 3.5 this morning. Total last night, 35.5, 36, 36.5. Today, 37/37.5. So we have seen at least some over money for this game. Not the only game, as I mentioned, that we've seen over money so far. Let's talk about Tennessee. And when it comes to misleading final scores, look, the Titans weren't good against the Bucs. That being said, they were down 13-7, driving to take the lead in the fourth quarter. And then you look up and they lose 29-7. You're like, what the? Well, it was not a good fourth quarter for Tennessee, to put it mildly. Cam Ward, 2 drives. He had 1 3-and-out and then a touchdown drive. Tennessee took the money against Tampa in that ballgame. The quote from Brian Callahan, quote, I thought Cam played well the 2 series he got. It was kind of a weird first half with only 3 possessions. He had 1 3-and-out, came back with a touchdown drive. He started to feel comfortable and was begging to go back in, but that was not in the cards. Ward, quote, it was a lot of guys first time playing together. Felt good to come up with points. I wanted to go out for a 3rd series, but Coach Callahan had a plan for us. We'll stick to his plan. Behind Cam Ward, pretty ugly for Tennessee. Brandon Allen, no scoring drives. He threw a pick, and he was stopped on the downs in the first drive of the third quarter inside the 5-yard line, with Tennessee playing for the lead. And Tim Boyle, a guy who has had preseason success in the past, a guy who started in this league, 4 of 13 for 24 yards. The offense didn't move at all. Punt, interception, pick 6 in Boyle's 4 drives. Only 11 first downs for Tennessee, only 3.6 yards per play. Plain and simple. Lots of talk about Tennessee's offensive line. How's it going to be? What's it going to look like? Well, that offensive line did not control the line of scrimmage, especially as the game progressed and second and third stringers were on the field. For Atlanta, look, they only ran 36 plays in the game. The game got called early. They didn't get to 55 minutes, despite that. If you had a ticket and all of a sudden there's a play that, what was it, like a 5-minute play before the league announced that they were going to suspend it, as the players, they snapped and then they all stood together and prayed after Detroit lost a defensive back, carted off the field. And then the league said, all right, we're going to cancel the game. That being said, Easton Stick first half, Emory Jones second half. It wasn't like they moved the football that great. They couldn't run the ball at all. 0 rushing first downs, 11 for 22, 11 carries, 22 yards. Wasn't pretty. And this is one worth noting. Raheem Morris now 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread in August as the Falcons head coach over the last 2 seasons. Although we'll give him an asterisk for this loss. We don't know. For this loss, we don't know how that fourth quarter would have played out were it not for the injury.
All right, let's go on to the second game on Friday night. That would be Kansas City, Seattle, 10 p.m. Eastern. They're 7 p.m. on the West Coast. Open 2.5, 39.5. Teddy, you mentioned those overs coming in right away. We're even starting to see some 41.5s pop up on my odds logic screen. 3 pretty much across the board until you get to some of the offshores and even South Point there in Vegas. Let's talk about this Chiefs team being favored here in the preseason.
Let's talk about our first emergency betting alert of the show. You talked about...
I had to do the sound effects because Teddy did not like Dan's siren he played this morning. He said it was too jarring. So I gotta do the sirens. I'm gonna get some glow sticks. It'll be like my nightclub days. And if you guys have rather here for the emergency betting alert,
yeah, I don't want like a wake up alarm. That's going to make people like the last, especially on Monday morning. That's the last thing anybody wants to hear is that particular noise. I want something light and fruity. Like,
he's right, Kelly. He is right.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna get like a
for what it's worth. That being said, if you like this total, it's already moved. All right, you can still find 41s right now. It's going higher. All right, if you like Kansas City, the 2.5s are disappearing. We're already seeing 3s out there. There are still 2.5s available right now. Kansas City 2.5 over 41. Both of those 2 lines I'm not convinced we're going to be seeing later this week. Last night was 2.5 and 40.5. So we've seen movement. The markets have tilted that direction. We haven't seen the broader move for every book getting pounded yet. I would not be surprised if we do. For Seattle, look, Drew Lock moved the football the whole first half. He did throw a red zone interception, and that's really the only reason that it wasn't a blowout. They still had 16-3 at the break with a missed extra point, but it could have been 24-3 at halftime were it not for that one Lock INT. Jalen Milroe came in the second half, 38 rushing yards, including a 27-yard scramble. That's bet on for a third stringer in preseason. And it's hard to run in August, hard to run consistently in August with the offensive line combinations. Well, Seattle, 32 carries, 170 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, 10 rushing first downs. Those were good numbers. And there's a open competition, not open competition, but there's right guard and center are both still in flux for Seattle. And head coach Mike Macdonald said that the competition will continue this week. So there's extra urgency for this offensive line. Of course, a tie for the Seabags in that game. Mike Macdonald, quote, "You never want to tie a football game. That kind of stinks." As for Kansas City, Mahomes led a 13-yard touchdown drive, 1 for 1 yard after an Arizona turnover with his passing. I would expect to see him more this week. Then Gardner Minshew came in, 2 drives, 1 touchdown. Then Bailey Zappi. Zappi was not good. Threw a couple of picks. Chris Olajuwon, 6 of 13 for 39. He had 2 drives to win the game, with a chance to win the game, and the offense did not work, and they did not come close to field goal range. Worth noting, file away for next year, Andy Reid now 0-3, straight up ATS in preseason openers the last 3 years. And he went 0-3 ATS last year, so it's now an 0-4 ATS run for Reid and company in August. His quote, "There were some good things. I thought the starters played well when they were in. They were sharp. After that, we were too sloppy. Too many penalties going backwards." So Reid showing some urgency for this week after a sloppy performance from everyone after the starters last week. That tends to be bet on. And again, we're already seeing that in the markets. The 2.5s, they're becoming 3s. If you like KC, bet it now.
Sorry for the delay. I am on Amazon buying one of those like red truck lights. I think that's what I need. I think I need a prop for the show, Teddy. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to hold up the light. Then it's not so jarring and it's funny. You guys, again, tell us in the comment section what you think would be the best. You guys run the show, not me. I'm just here trying to pretend that I, really, really love the NFL. College football is right around the corner. Teddy covers. And you know what? You did really well in college football last year. Let's talk about some of your big tickets in regards to the plays that you're making and what people can expect there at WagerTalk.
Yeah, so, the big tickets across sports have been really good. I'm close to 60% dating back to 2021, counting, I think it's 59.4, 59.5%, counting every 5% big ticket play in every sport since 2021. College football has been particularly good. 6-0 the last 6 tries. That dates back to 2023. I didn't put out a lot of them last year. Very selective with the 5% big tickets in both college football and the NFL. But when I post them, they've been very, very good. And as you talked about, that 100% run that dates back to 2023 on the 5%. Hopefully we'll find something for week 1. Have not posted a 5% big ticket just yet when it comes to this year's college football. But it's something bettors should pay attention to.
All right, let's go into Saturday, the first game there at 1:00. And actually, we have a handful of 1:00 games. It's going to be almost like a real NFL Sunday, Teddy. Green Bay, Indianapolis. Indy opened -4.5. Total 38.5 here on my odds logic screen. 6.5, Teddy. 39.5. Again, we're seeing these overs coming in. But man, are the wise guys just laying the favorites and hope that maybe we see some regression again from last week? I know they took a beating, but this is interesting to see all of these sizable favorites get bet up early.
So the teams are favored for a reason. And there, there's issues right now in Green Bay. That's why they're fading the Colts in this ball game. Last night it was 4.5, 38.5, pretty much painted across the board. Today it's 6. There's even 6.5 out there right now, 39.5. So obviously the overnight money has come for the favorite and for the over. One of these things, I don't know if it's worth anything, but Matt LaFleur, 2022, 2023, 2024. He lost off every preseason win and won off every preseason loss. The Packers against the Jets this past weekend did not look good. They allowed a fumble return touchdown. Jordan Love, 2 drives, 2 punts, only 1 of 5 passing. Malik Willis had a sack, fumble, return for a touchdown. Only had led one field goal drive. Sean Clifford and then Taylor Eigersma. And I'll tell you this, when Taylor Eigersma is on the field and you're down by 20, you don't need to watch anymore. Not with the football. 64 net passing yards between the four quarterbacks, 1 of 10 on third downs. But what's the issue? I'm not sure there's urgency here. They were without 4 of their top 6 receivers against the Jets, very banged up receiving core. They're without their starting cornerbacks, Nate Hobbs and Xavier McKinney, for the rest of the preseason. They got outgained 403 to 188. The Jets forced 4 sacks. They had a pair of first half takeaways. LaFleur said he's not likely to play Love anymore in the preseason. He did say he may push a little harder in practice. LaFleur's quote after the game, quote, "That was a humbling experience. Definitely not what we want to put out there. I don't care. Preseason, regular season, doesn't matter to me. It was just sloppy football. Too many penalties, drops, missed tackles, bad decision-making, and it really showed up in every phase. If you do that, you're going to get your ass kicked." And that's exactly what happened. So the money's come against Green Bay already. We know they're banged up. They're banged up on both sides of the ball, receiving core and cornerback room, and that's certainly an issue. But I would say there's more urgency than usual for a team coming off that level of performance with those type of coach quotes from LaFleur. But again, we're not going to see Jordan Love, I don't think, which is part of the reason why we've seen Indy money. The Colts took a ton of money against Baltimore. The defense picked off the Ravens on the opening drive, led to a field goal. Everything's going great. And then Anthony Richardson got hurt on the second drive, and the tone completely changed for Indy. That was what, -1 to -6 in that game. They allowed a punt return touchdown. They allowed a long kickoff return to set up another touchdown. Daniel Jones was okay, 10 of 21 for a $144. Riley Leonard had lots of playing time in the second half. He threw a pick, and then he got stopped on downs in Baltimore territory. The last 2 drives, the game on the line, Colts had a chance, but Riley Leonard did not get the job done. Quarterbacks coach Cam Turner talking about the Richardson injury. I don't think it's a big deal. He looked like he was gripping it normal. Anytime you put something in a throwing hammer, it's a little bit different, uncomfortable. Richardson was back in practice already, so I would expect he'll get plenty of playing time this week against the Packers. And, of course, when you have a QB competition for the starters, well, the betting markets are interested in that. Hence the money for Indy last week, and hence the money for Indy that we've seen already this week.
All right. New England, Minnesota. Minnesota. This is where it gets a little weird for me, Teddy. So just so you know, I've got my odds logic screen open. Johnny Detroit told me the Bet War was one of the sharper books. Of course, I've got Superbook in there. I've got Circa, DraftKings, FanDuel, Pinnacle. So open is 1.5 for Minnesota. But one of the sharpest books and South Point are pick'em here, even though Minnesota opened up as a 1.5-point favorite. New England's pretty much, 1.5 across the board. It's just weird for me to see this 38.5 up to 39.5, of course, at Pinnacle, because they're getting ahead of the market. Talk to me about when you see sharp books here on some of these screens, completely different, 1.5 points off of the market. Or is it really not that big of a deal, in the NFL? Because as John Murray likes to say, NFL games don't land one.
Well, in preseasons past, 1 and 2 matter a lot in the NFL. Now with the games, we saw 2 ties this weekend, all right? And we didn't see any games decided by less than a field goal. So that's one that stood out to me as maybe things are shifting a little bit. That being said, it's going to take more than 1 week of data for me to be comfortable with that. But with the you don't have to play overtime, we'll just call the game off, and a tie rule, that certainly changed the way it plays out in the second half and the fourth quarter of many of these ball games. Last night, what did we see? It was Minnesota -1.5, total 38/38.5. So really haven't seen that much in that regard. The Patriots against the Commanders, there was heavy New England money. I couldn't figure it out why the money came in New England. I took the value with Washington. That was as wrong a side as I'll have all year. The value was gone after the opening kickoff was returned for a touchdown. Oops, you got a touchdown? No, give that touchdown away. And the Pats are pretty jacked up for Mike Vrabel in his home debut. 7 scoring drives for New England compared to 2 punts. That's good for a preseason game. They hung 48 points. You don't see that a lot in August. Drake May had a touchdown drive. Josh Dobbs had 3 drives, field goal, touchdown. Ben Woolridge was the guy I wanted to bet against. He got in the game. It was already 27-3. And by the way, he led a pair of fourth quarter touchdown drives. Not the bet against I thought he was. Washington, 13 penalties. New England, 2. So much of that was the Commanders looking pretty awful. That being said, there's some excitement in New England this year, no question about it. And Drake May, at least a part of that. For Minnesota, J.J. McCarthy had a nice field goal drive. Sam Howell was pretty good. He had a 6-minute field goal drive and a 7-minute touchdown drive before halftime. Brett Rippon came in, 4 third quarter drives, none moved the football. Max Brosmer came in the fourth. He moved the ball a little bit. But the key in that game against Houston was Brian Flores' defense. Just controlled the flow throughout. I couldn't understand the over money that came in that ball game. I'm not looking to bet Minnesota games over the total right now. And note that this game, 38.5 last night, still 38.5 today. This is not one of the games that's taken over money. Here's the quote from Kevin O'Connell about J.J. McCarthy, who looked pretty good. Quote, "We don't do a lot of game planning for these games, but we also want to give our guys a chance to go out there and have success. There are going to be some plays where guys have to rise up and make some plays above the scheme. He did that a couple times with his legs. It didn't really feel like he put the ball in harm's risk very much in that sequence." So certainly McCarthy showing promise for Minnesota. And right now, again, this line, a little bit of Patriots money, not doing a whole lot just yet.
All right, let's get into the next handful of games here. Carolina at Houston. Houston up to 2.5 here at some spots. Teddy, after opening a very small half-point favorite, 37.5, and even some 38 starting to pop up. 38.5 there at DraftKings in regards to the total.
Yeah, and last night we're looking at anything from 1.5 to 2.5 on this game, total 37.5. So we have seen, really not a lot. The markets are still deciding where this game should be. Carolina versus Cleveland. Bryce Young led a touchdown drive. Andy Dalton played after. All the second quarter, 3 drives in the third quarter. Dave Canales was really trying to get him a score, and he couldn't. Dalton couldn't move the offense against the backups for Cleveland. That's a concern. He left down 21-7 after throwing an interception on 1st and 10 from their own 38. Jake Plummer, the rookie out of Louisville, led a late field goal drive that wasn't easy or pretty. They had a muff punt that led to a Brown touchdown. The Browns offense didn't score in the first 3 possessions when facing Carolina starting defense. That's something we'll talk about again in the Shaddeur Sanders narrative. Again, 3 possessions against Carolina starters didn't work. That being said, 251 yards of offense, 6 penalties, 2 turnovers. It wasn't clean. Canales, quote, "Part of our play style is playing smart, and I don't feel like we did that." For Houston, Davis Mills got a touchdown drive. Then Keaton Slovis came in, had 1 field goal on the first drive after halftime. Slovis did not move the ball effectively. Then Graham Mertz was pretty awful. Like, again, if you watched him in college, Graham Mertz is not an NFL quarterback. Keaton Slovis is not an NFL quarterback. Mertz threw interceptions on each of the game's final 3 drives. DeMeco Ryans, quote, "I was really pleased with our first offensive group." Yes, I liked everyone just being very calm and composed. Davis did an excellent job of driving the ball down the field, commanding the huddle, putting the ball in good placement. Worth noting that injury to C.J. Gardner-Johnson isn't as serious as it looked. Their star safety, their star free agent pickup, could be ready to play in week 1. That said, another issue in the secondary, their safety, Jimmy Ward, got arrested for the second time in the last 2 months. They picked up Jalen Mills, or signed Jalen Mills, as a result of 91 career starts. He played for the Jets last year, and it's an intriguing veteran presence for Houston on the defensive side of the football.
All right, Teddy, I had asked you yesterday after seeing a really funny tweet about, what were your initial reactions, right, of a player. And our friends at Splash Sports talked about Quinn Ewers, and I wanted to just write, guys, did you not watch any Texas games? But I didn't, because I get too much flack about that. When I sent it to you, you immediately assumed I wanted to talk about Shaddeur Sanders, and we're going to. But I was actually referring to Jackson Dart and how everybody was losing their minds. You're right, though. I was just on social media. Everybody was, Shaddeur is going to be the starter week 1, and we're seeing this crazy, in my opinion, overreaction. Philadelphia, though, a 1-point favorite. That's what they opened up at, still across the board. Totals ticked up a little bit from 36.5, seeing some 37.5s and even some 38s. Talk to me about what we saw week 1 from Shaddeur Sanders and why everybody needs to pump the brakes.
Yeah, chill the F out. Look, we're interested when a rookie quarterback comes in and moves a football against opposing first-string defense. Absolutely. That's not what happened with Shaddeur Sanders. Shaddeur Sanders faced a basic defense. It wasn't like they were blitzing. And when the starters were on the field, Shaddeur Sanders was ineffective. Once the starters left the field, Shaddeur Sanders moved the football and everything was fine. But starter versus starter, 3 drives, no points with Sanders on the field. Jackson Dart was pretty good, but you asked me which quarterback impressed me, and I don't know, is Tanner McKee a rookie? I don't think so. But he was the player of the weekend. Nobody looked better than Tanner McKee at QB this past weekend for Philadelphia, 20 of 25 for 252 after Philly fell behind early, Cincy starters versus Eagles backups. McKee burned the sharp money. And then you had the DTR, Thompson Robinson. It wasn't a great, but he had a touchdown drive, came after a turnover, and a 4th down penalty gave him a free 1st and goal, so he didn't get him into the end zone. Kyle McCord in the 4th quarter couldn't move the football at all. Worth noting, in practice yesterday, Pro Bowl left guard for Philadelphia, Landon Dickerson, was carted off the field. That's an impact injury. That being said, Philadelphia is deep on the offensive line and on the defensive line, much, much deeper than most teams. And for Cleveland, look, Sanders was good. Tyler Huntley was good. Sanders was on the field for 45 plays. His quote, I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's what it is. I've got pockets of finding my rhythm, and I got into that quicker, regardless of anything. Overall, it felt like me out there. Did I play up to par? No, I don't feel like I did. But overall, the main goal was to win. And that's honestly what we did. Again, three drives against Carolina starters, no points in there, didn't move the football. And that quote saying the main goal was to win stood out to me. Kevin Stefanski, prior to this weekend, had 2 wins in 10 preseason games in 2022. The Browns sat the majority of their starters. Their main goal is not to win. Now, Sanders had been the 4th string quarterback throughout camp for Cleveland. So he's getting to work with better guys than he'd been playing with. But Stefanski's hopeful that Pickett and Gabriel, Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel, will both be able to fully participate in joint practices this week with Philadelphia, which will say we'll see how much action either of them two gets in the game. But just about all the games this week we're talking about, there will be joint practice sessions. Those joint practice sessions, again, the team that looks great in joint practice isn't always the team that's going to bring it in the game, because those guys got their meaningful reps in already.
All right, let's keep on cruising through the rest of these games. Teddy, Miami, Detroit, Miami up to 3.5. I can't believe this one's been bet up 2 points already. 35.5 the opener, 36.5, 37.5, 37. As I look across my odds logic screen, Miami yesterday looked fairly decent. Now, again, I was just kind of perusing, right? When you're on the airplane, your channel flipping, you're watching different games. But from what I saw, not bad offensively. Yet then they just kind of stalled in the second half when they made some changes. If you had Miami, condolences, unless, of course, you had the +1. As you mentioned, the Detroit Lions game got cut short. Talk about this one and what you expect to see from both teams.
So the Miami game versus the Bears had insane last 2-minute shenanigans. If you want to talk about something that you don't expect to see, there was a scenario late in the game where Chicago, in the regular season, they kicked the field goal on 4th down and 4 from where they're about the 38 or the 40-yard line or so. Instead, in the preseason, they took a shot down the field. It looked like a pass interference, didn't get the call. So then Miami got the ball. They, too, were in a position where in the regular season they'd have kicked. But they're like, it's a tie game. There's 20 seconds left. Who cares? They chucked it up. And they were stopped on 4th down, which led to one more chance for Chicago in the closing seconds. And again, they couldn't score for the second time either. We'll talk about that when we come down to the Bears. There was heavy late money for Miami when the markets found out Tua was going to play. And obviously where you bet it mattered. The Bears -3 down to pick. There was even some Bears +1 out there that I didn't get, but I wish I would have had with the game finishing a tie. So Zach Wilson took 4 sacks on 13 dropbacks. Quinn Ewers, and I bet Chicago because I wanted to bet against Quinn Ewers, and he was every bit the bet against I thought he'd be. The offense didn't move. He was 5 of 18. Miami wasn't good in the second half of that ball game, but the Bears found ways to screw things up. They just did. It was one of those type of contests. Detroit, the game ended early, obviously, after the Lions D-back got carted off the field. They're not playing any starters here in August. Hendon Hooker had a rough Hall of Fame game. He said he had a lot to prove this next week after getting the start. And what happened? Fumble, 3 and out, 1 first down and out, and then a sack fumble before he got benched against Atlanta. Got 38 yards on 10 pass attempts. Kyle Allen was much better against the Falcons. 3rd and 4th stringers. He played like a veteran, 7 of 8 for $120 and 2. But we're expecting something from Hendon Hooker that we haven't seen either of the first 2 weeks. Clearly, the markets are saying Hooker may not be a guy that we trust with all this money pouring in on Miami right now. The 3s, they're gone. The 3.5s, they're gone. I'm seeing 4/4.5 as we speak at many books. Sorry, there's still some 3.5s out there, but literally this line is moving as we're talking. Was as low as 1.5 last night. Total was as low as 35.5 last night. If you like Miami, you've already missed the best of the number. Well,
You're muted, Kelly.
I am muted because I was just commenting on Slack about how we have 1,000 of you guys watching live on X. So shout out to all of you guys. Shout out to all of you guys here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel and, of course, on Instagram. We appreciate you guys. It is 11:30 here in the morning on the East Coast. It's 8:30 on the West Coast on a Monday. So shout out to you guys. This is why we do this show. San Francisco plus 6.5 now. Teddy, this one opened 3.5 in favor of the Raiders. Total's been ticked up as well to 40.5. Pete Carroll was interesting last week. I saw a sign making fun of Geno Smith, and he kind of got a little snappy there and said we should be giving him some more credit. Is Geno going to be starting in this game, and that's why we're seeing them as such a sizable favorite now?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm comfortable emergency betting alert this one as well. Because if you like Las Vegas, again, it's already last night we were seeing in this game there were 3.5s. It's 6 this morning. I expect it to go to 7 or higher. All right. There was heavy Denver money against San Francisco. +1, it was high as -7, close 6.5 at most books. The 49ers led 9-0 after the first quarter, and then it was a 30-0 Broncos run out. Mac Jones opening touchdown drive, then a 3 and out, then an interception, then he got benched. Carter Bradley from South Alabama, then Tanner Mordecai from Wisconsin. Neither guy an NFL quarterback. They got 3 quarters worth of playing time last week and didn't produce a point. 3.8 yards per play on offense, 1 of 12 on third downs, and -4 turnovers. Kyle Shanahan, it was frustrating. I liked how we started out, but after that, there wasn't too much to be excited about. We didn't get many first downs, 4 turnovers, 3 picks, the fumble. We made too many mistakes. Shanahan, there's no urgency in winning preseason games. It's not a bet on QB rotation. And San Fran, like another team we're going to talk about later, is a banged-up football team. And the 49ers, a team with big goals for this season. When you're banged up in early August, those guys are not going to be on the field against the Raiders. Now, the Raiders are working through different offensive line combinations throughout camp. They had offensive line problems throughout against Seattle. Geno only completed 1 pass. Aston Jonty had -1 rushing yards. They mercifully sat them after 1 drive before they got killed. Aiden O'Connell had a great camp and put him in a real game, and he threw 2 picks, neither of which was pretty. The rookie Cam Miller from North Dakota State actually moved the football well in the fourth quarter. They had 2 touchdown drives in the fourth. And, of course, if you paid attention to the emergency line and betting alerts last week and bet the Raiders right at the get-go, you were able to cash a ticket with the Raiders. The defense got gashed pretty good in that game versus the run, versus the pass, third downs. None of them were pretty. They had a blocked field goal with a chance to win on the final play of the game. Pete Carroll, who's a guy who's interested in winning in August, quote, "We started really poorly. We didn't run the ball well in the first half. We didn't really do anything very well. But we stayed close, and it was an opportunity for us to face that and then come back and see what you do in the second half." And it was a marvelous second half. Carroll always finds positive things to say. That's why his teams love him so much.
All right, Teddy. Let's keep it on going. We got 8 games left. I started the monologue off way too long. New York Jets, New York Giants. Ooh, this has been a fun line flip. Jets open 1.5, now +3, total up to 39.5.
Yeah, I mean, last night there were pick'ems for the Jets. There were 1.5s. There were 2.5s. This has been pounded since we got on air. It was still Giants 1.5 when we got on air. Now we're seeing 3s and 3.5. So the emergency betting alert has come and gone for this ball game. We have seen over money, 37.5 up to 38.5 for Jets Giants. And sorry, I lost my Jets Giants notes somewhere. Oh, yeah, Justin Fields led a touchdown drive against the Green Bay backups. Brady Cook had a nice drive. He got stopped on downs, then nothing. Adrian Martinez played the whole second half. He was pretty good. Tyrod Taylor, knee injury has kept him sidelined. I don't think he's going to play this week either. They did score on a fumble return touchdowns. The defense was excellent, only allowed 1 of 10 on third downs. And they gained 9.1 yards per pass attempt, a team that had struggled to throw the football throughout practice. Well, the Jets, the market certainly liked what they did this past week. But the Giants, maybe markets like what they did more. Russell Wilson looked good, a field goal drive. Jackson Dart led 3 scoring drives. Jameis Winston supposed to move the football in the third quarter. Well, he had punt, interception called back on defensive offsides. That led to a touchdown. Tommy DeVito was slinging it in the fourth quarter versus third-string defenders. DeVito, a bet on QB in August. The quotes coming out of the G-men, Brian DeBall, quote, "It's about what I thought Jackson Dart would do. He's improved since he's been here. Still got a long, long way to go." So as far as good as Dart looked, obviously not as good as the stats might indicate. According to the head coach, the Giants clearly have a betting a QB rotation that the betting markets like, and they've taken all the early money. At 3, I'm not convinced it goes to 3.5 or higher. So if you've missed the very best of the number, if you like the G-men, that said, I wouldn't talk you out of taking the -3 right now. If you like the Giants, you're not getting crushed when it comes to line value.
All right, Teddy, let's go to LA. Chargers, Rams. Chargers opened as a 2.5-point favorite, total 35.5. They've taken some money, some 3s, some 3.5s, and all the way up to 37.5 on some of these shops on the odds logic screen.
Yeah, it was mostly 3.5. It was almost all 3.5 last night. 3.5 with a 2.5 as a percentage. So there was one book that had a 2.5, one prominent book. Everyone else at 3.5 already last night. 36.5 here, 37.5 out there. The total has been bet up. Tyler Heineke got the start for the Chargers. 3 drives, 2 punts, and a safety. Wasn't pretty. Trey Lance wasn't like the Hall of Fame game. He did lead 1 touchdown drive before halftime, played the whole third quarter too. The offense wasn't great. And then DJ Uiagalelei on the last drive, he only threw 1 pass, but it was a beauty. Set up a 41-yard completion that set up a touchdown. That being said, they only had 3 passing first downs, which is few as you'll ever see for a team with a winning cover. I was worried about the Rashawn Slater injury, how it was going to affect the Chargers. It's still 11 rushing first downs, 148 rushing yards, 4.4 yards per carry. They have a joint practice with the Rams on Wednesday. I read a report that it could be canceled because there are too many Chargers injuries. And yet they're taking the money here. Rams, Stetson Bennett played the entire game. That's bet on. They had 38 carries for 181 yards. That's bet on. The quotes coming out of L.A. are all about Matthew Stafford. He threw 68 passes at the Rams practice facility during a workout on Saturday morning. A step in the right direction. L.A. won with Stetson Bennett, but they're not a team that gives a hoot about wins or losses in August. And, I can't lay 3.5 for the Chargers, though. They've got injuries, and cluster injuries matter more than any other factor at this time of the year when it comes to preseason success.
All right, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, the Bucks -2.5 at opener, and pretty much still there, maybe -120 there at Pinnacle. 37.5, some 38s popping up there. Teddy, talk about what we saw from the Bucks last week against the Panthers, and maybe Skylar Thompson's a good NFL quarterback.
Against third-string defenses, you love a guy like Skylar Thompson. Again, who's good? Well, you're good in theory, if you have some experience, you've seen NFL defenses, you have an offensive line that can protect you a little bit, and or the opposing team's not blitzing, and you're facing third string or fourth string defenders, yeah, Skylar Thompson's great. Bet on quarterback in August. Last night, this line was sitting at Tampa -1/1.5, 37.5. This is one game that has not seen over money for what it's worth. The Steelers, the market's faded the hell out of Pittsburgh in their opener, +1 to +6. They were sitting starters. Their depth is fine. Now, Mason Rudolph, again, bet on duo in August with Skylar Thompson. Don't know who's going to be QB this week, but that's what we saw last week. Now, Tomlin had been 18-4 straight up from 2017 to 2023 in the preseason. Then last year, 0-3 straight up and against the spread. Well, Pittsburgh got back to their winning ways in week 1 of this year's preseason. For Tampa Bay, money poured in against the Titans. They were against Tampa on the Titans. The Bucs were +1 at the open. They were as high as +4 at the close. 178 rushing yards for Tampa Bay, though they had an injury. Rashard White got hurt in that game. The D forced 3 turnovers and basically dominated the game. I wanted to bet against this QB duo, Kyle Trask in the first half, Connor Bazelak in the second half. Bazelak wasn't good, only 48 passing yards. I wanted to bet against him for good reason, but Tennessee didn't do anything, unfortunately. And Trask was pretty good. Todd Bowles, I thought he played very well. He made some timely throws down the field. He was poised in the pocket. Practice wasn't a start this past week, but he played well in the game.
All right, keeping it moving here. Baltimore taking on Dallas. Baltimore up to 3 now, 37.5 popping up on the screen as well. Teddy, talk about what we're expecting to see from the Ravens and the Cowboys.
Yeah, look ahead. Last night line was split between 2.5 and 3 for this ballgame. Total 36.5. Look at that. We have not seen the over money for this game either. Baltimore, it was a little bit fraudulent, the final score in their win. They had a punt return touchdown. They had a long kickoff return that set up another touchdown. Devin Leary, 3 of 12 for 43 yards. Cooper Rush, 2 of 4 for 13 yards. Combined, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, sacked twice. You won by 2 touchdowns against the spread with a negative turnover differential and 3.8 yards per play on offense. That's not going to happen every week. For the Cowboys, Joe Milton went most of the game. He had one game where he played New England last year, but this is not a veteran that's comfortable in the system. And then he bruised his elbow in the fourth quarter. Will Greer took over on the last drive. Milton had a bunch of wow moments during the first training camp with Dallas. But we've been hearing this about Joe Milton since he was quarterbacking in Michigan before he went to Tennessee. About his arm strength is great. Brian Schottenheimer. The arm is very evident. I mean, you cannot miss the arm strength. Yeah, we've known that for Joe Milton for the last 6 years, but that hasn't resulted into good offenses moving the football down the field. We'll have to see what his status is this week, again, after hurting his elbow on the final drive of the game this past weekend against the Rams.
All right, keeping it moving here. Arizona up to 6.5, Teddy, after opening yesterday at 3.5. 40.5, starting to pop up here on the Odds Logic screen.
Yeah, Denver is a very popular choice in the betting markets right now. We saw that in week 1. They trailed 9-0 after the first quarter and then had a 30-0 run out. And that was with Bo Nix struggling. 6 of 11 for 31 yards. Jarrett Stidham came in and played great, played all the second quarter, played the whole third quarter too. Sam Ehlinger stepped in the fourth, punt, stopped on downs, and a touchdown drive late on a short field goal after a San Francisco turnover. The Broncos defense has dominated in camp. They dominated this game too. 3.8 yards per play allowed. They only allowed 1 third down conversion on 12 attempts. They were +4 in turnovers, and they had a 4th down stop as well. That being said, San Fran didn't play a whole lot of starters. Sean Payton, I thought we started slow. Both first units called the performance average to below average. There are a number of things that we're going to have to improve on. So Peyton lighting the fire still, despite the final score showing that Denver won by 3 touchdowns. As for Arizona, Kyler Murray, 2 drives, 1 field goal, 1 interception. Then Jacoby Brissett, Clayton Tune played the whole second half. The offense didn't move the ball much. 1 field goal after halftime. They had 3 turnovers, finished -1, but still won the game as a dog. They fumbled their first 2 kickoff returns of the game. Then the quotes, they wanted to be positive despite all the miscues that they had. You can't replicate it in practice, moving around with the speed you're moving, going left to right, lateral bodies moving. I had fun. I had a lot of fun out there. That's Kyler Murray's quote. Worth noting, Jonathan Gannon has been the head coach in Arizona since 2023. His largest margin of victory in August, 3 points. He has 3 wins by his 1 and 3 points. And he lost both previous week 2 games by a touchdown or more.
All right, let's move along to Sunday. We've got Jacksonville taking on the Saints. 2.5 was the opener, 38.5 down to 1.5, Teddy. And by the way, we already let Andy know if you guys are here early to watch WagerTalk TV, we're going to be just a couple minutes late because I like to filibuster before the show. So Teddy, take your time on these last 3 games.
Don't you worry. So you've been saying, let's move it along. I'm keeping my eye on the clock. I know we got to move. And, I shorten my analysis when necessary. What are we talking? Jags and Saints. Jacksonville -1.5, -2, -2.5 last night, 38.5 in that ball game. It's 1.5 everywhere today, total 38.5. So we've seen the markets have took out the higher numbers. The Saints look like the worst team in the NFL. Pretty bad. Kellen Moore's now 0-1 straight up and against the spread in August, and they were rough in that ball game. Spencer Rattler, he's no NFL starting quarterback. They had a muffed Chargers punt. They still couldn't punch in a touchdown. Tyler Shuck came in after him. He was rough too, threw a pick 6. Jake Hayner played late. He threw a pick 2. And in general, we like teams with a quarterback competition. The markets are saying, we've seen some Saints money here, but the markets are saying, not this quarterback competition, perhaps. Against the Jaguars, they took heavy money, -1 to -6 against Pittsburgh. Trevor Lawrence, a 7-minute opening drive against the Pittsburgh backups, led to a touchdown. Nick Mullins had a 12-play, 36 yards field goal drive, and then 2 punts. And then Cam Little hit a 70-yard field goal before halftime. John Walford, 1 touchdown, 1 drive, 1 touchdown. Seth Hennigan from Memphis, 1 drive field goal, 2nd drive inside the 30 when the clock ran out. Liam Cohen said his offense was flagged twice in his opening drive. 4 drop passes in the first half, and the first team defense was gashed early. So there's urgency for the Saints. There's a little bit of urgency here for Jacksonville as well, even though a performance that wasn't as good as they hoped, and a game where they took a boatload of cash and lost all that money for their backers.
All right, Buffalo is a 2-point underdog. They're at Chicago. Total 38.5, pretty much across the board now, Teddy. As you mentioned, getting lots of early over money after last week, seeing 14-2 to the over. Thoughts on this one?
So there's no indication yet. That being said, let's emergency betting alert this. I have to think there's going to be money coming from Chicago, just like we saw. Tyson Bagent and then Case Keenum. That's a bet on 2-0. When you talk about veteran QBs in the NFL, Austin Reed, the third stringer, he was rough. He had 2 drives to win the game and couldn't move the football either time. There was late game shenanigans. We talked about that early. But the quarterback rotation that we like, and it's also worth noting, Dennis Allen was blitzing. We like defense coordinators who blitz. 6 sacks for the Bears. They'd have a couple of blown coverages that made it different. The red zone defense wasn't all that good. For Buffalo, they threw the ball all game. Offense at 7.1 yards per play. Mitch Trubisky was good. Mike White was good. Shane Buechele was good. 2 bets with something to prove. McDermott, 11-2 straight up. 10-3 ATS from 2019 through 2023. But 1-2 straight up against the spread last year. This year, 0-1. The game they won last year was 9-3. And Buffalo didn't run the football well last week. I would expect we'll see lots of running the football this week against Chicago. The Bears, I expect them to take some money. No surprise here if this line closes 3 or higher.
All right, last but not least, Monday night preseason week 2. Cincinnati opened up 3. Sitting at 3 still, 39.5 up to 41.5. Teddy, tell me why the Bengals are getting, a little bit more love again here in week 2 after just getting throttled by the Eagles last week.
Well, so Washington has shown that they didn't give a crap.
Okay.
Worth noting, this line, it's going to say open 3 and still at 3. This line was at 2.5 everywhere last night and is now 3 this morning. So one book might have opened 3. The broader markets open 2.5, and we've seen the broader markets move from 2.5 to 3. We've seen a bunch of over money for this ball game. If you like the over, don't wait. One last emergency betting alert before this line is through. Open 39, or before the show is through. Open 39.5. Now we're looking at 41.5. It's a single event game on Monday night after a week of overs. We expect to see even more over money coming in this one. And look, it's probably not going to be my money. All right. The starting offense looked great for Cincinnati. Joe Burrow with 2 first-quarter touchdown drives. That was Cincy starter versus Philly backups. They couldn't run the football. Desmond Ridder showed us again that he's not an NFL quarterback. He did lead a late fourth quarter starting drive, but he wasn't good. Jake Browning wasn't very good. His interception essentially ended the game, put Philly up by 3 scores. Do not overreact to Cincinnati's defensive struggles like everybody on social media did. Oh, my God, the Bengals defense again. What Cincy did in that game, base defense only. All right? They weren't showing any looks. They weren't showing any blitzes. They had the first string defense got lit up, but they were just playing base defense. Joe Burrow got extensive preseason action only the second time in his career. We could see more of that this week. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Burrow and how much he's going to play. As for Washington, again, they allowed an opening kickoff return touchdown. Josh Johnson and Sam Hartman were okay. Hartman got the start. He wasn't good. He was outclassed by the Patriots defense. Johnson played the rest of the way. He threw a pick too, but the offense moved the ball, at least with him behind center. Dan Quinn, we talked about it last week, the joint practice sessions. Be aware of what's going on in the joint practice sessions. Last week, Quinn was happy with the Commanders' look in the joint practice session. As a result, he announced he was going to sit 30-plus guys for the game, and that certainly affected Washington's results, both on the field and the point spread. That being said, his quote after Washington 13 penalties compared to 2 for New England, all 3 phases, I thought it was sloppy. They stacked, and that showed sloppiness to me. And then in practice was just the opposite, so that did not make me happy. Perhaps a bit more urgency this week for the Commanders when it comes to the game. But again, if the joint practices are good, I don't think Quinn's going to worry about it all that much.
All right, we'll be back next Monday. I'll be in Ireland. We're going to try to make sure that I have good Wi-Fi and can be here. If not, Dan Alexander will be filling in the host chair for me. Kelly Stewart, Kelly in Vegas on all your social channels. Teddy Covers at Teddy_Covers. Make sure you guys hang around. Wager Talk Today is up next.